So are we live?
I can't see anything. Still says waiting for Interlay.
So are we live?
I can't see anything.
We're live.
Nope.
Yes, we are. I see it on YouTube.
Oh, yep, I see.
All right, perfect. So, welcome everyone to this workshop on Interlay and Kintsugi staking. We'll give this 2 more minutes for people to join in, and then we'll kick it off. This session is also being recorded, and the slides will also be available to review afterwards. You can also post questions into the YouTube live comments, and we will try to answer them after the presentation. So, the schedule for today is we will give a brief explanation of Kintsugi and Interlay staking, how it works, why it's designed in a certain way, things that you need to take care of. We'll then show a demo of how to stake using the Kintsugi dApp, and then we'll leave time for questions. We also have collected a few questions that we've already seen from the community, and we'll go through those if we're done with questions in the YouTube live chat. And with this, let's jump right in. Right, so before we start, a disclaimer. Please do your own research. Familiarize yourself with the risks of staking before deciding to participate. In this post and also this presentation is merely informational, and by no means are we recommending that you participate in Kintsugi staking. Before you do anything, we highly recommend that you check out the documentation that is linked here. The slides will be published afterwards. All right, so let's talk about staking. So what is staking and why do we need it? Staking means locking your KINT or then on Interlay tokens with a parachain for a predefined time. That's basically it. Now what staking enables you to do is to participate in governance and earn staking rewards in KINT or Inter. Now Kintsugi and Interlay have a special form of staking. It's different to what you know from Polkadot and other parachains. Specifically, there are no validators or collators involved, there is no delegation, and there is no risk of slashing. There are other risks, but there is no slashing involved. Now, before diving into staking, let's take a quick glimpse at Kintsugi Governance, because staking is actually a part of the governance mechanism. Kintsugi Governance is different from Polkadot's. Specifically, it is liquid. This means that token holders directly vote on what happens with the networks. There is no council. It's optimistic. This means that governance is fast and dynamic. Proposals with low turnouts, meaning where people are not active, where not many people are voting, for example, things that are not important to the wider community, very specific proposals, minor fixes, they do not need a full majority. They need less yes votes to pass. However, proposals which are disputed, where you have a lot of people participating, there of course you need a majority of yes votes to succeed. And last but not least, which brings us to the actual stake to vote mechanism, governance is staked. To align interests of participants in governance, you have to stake your tokens. And the longer you stake, the more interest you have in the health of the system, and hence the more voting power you will get. So, and this is what stake to vote is. Stake to vote means that to participate in governance, you must stake your KINT. The more and the longer you stake, the more voting power you will have, for the reasons explained just now. Voting power is measured in vKINT. The more vKINT, the more staking rewards. It's as simple as that. Rewards are distributed proportionally to your share of the total vKINT. This means the larger your percentage of the overall staked KINT, the more staking rewards you can get. And last but not least, quite important, you can stake both your vested and unvested KINT. For those of you who are familiar with the DeFi ecosystem, will see the parallels to the Curve Vote escrowed staking and voting mechanism. Now let's talk about vKINT. vKINT is the measure of voting power, and it combines two measures: number of staked KINT and the duration of your lock. It's important to note that vKINT is non-fungible and non-transferable. It's not even a token. It's just a measure of how much voting power and how much reward share you have in the system. And the magic vKINT formula is 1 vKINT equals to 1 KINT staked for 96 weeks. 96 weeks is the maximum staking duration on Kintsugi, and I'll come to that in a second. Your vKINT decreases as time progresses. That means after, let's say, half of the lock period, let's say you lock your vKINT for 1 year, after half a year, you will have half of the vKINT that you had initially, unless you extend the lock time. Why? Because the time is an inherent measure of vKINT. As time progresses, the remaining lock period decreases, which means that your vKINT amount decreases as well. The lock duration is per account. Now this is a very important thing to understand. This means that, let's say you lock 1 KINT for 48 weeks from your main account. And then you have a secondary account which has 100 KINT and you'd like to lock that for a shorter period. For example, for 2 weeks. Now you have two options. Either you accept that you have to lock your vKINT, your KINT for 48 weeks with your main account, right? If you use your main account, you can only extend the lock. So it's 48 weeks plus. Or you use another account, for example, the secondary account with 100 KINT, to stake for shorter periods. But it's important to understand, once you have staked from your main account, even just 1 KINT for 96 weeks, this account can only stake for 96 weeks plus. You cannot shorten the staking duration. Now, let's talk about Kintsugi staking in numbers. The minimum staking duration is 1 week. The maximum staking duration is 96 weeks. Now, the 96 weeks comes from the parachain lease period actually. 96 weeks is 2x the parachain lease period, and this will be the same case also on Interlay. Of course, these parameters can be changed by governance. Now, you can stake in increments of 1 week. So 1 week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 40 weeks, and so on. The system itself, under the hood, will round up to the next full week when you stake. Staking rewards are 500,000 KINT over the first 4 years. That's 5% of the initial 4-year supply. And the emission is linear. This means 125,000 KINT per year over the first 4 years. It's important to note that the current Kintsugi tokenomics have an inflationary model. This means that after 4 years, a 2% annual inflation kicks in, and then the staking rewards will be 6.7% of that annual inflation. And now, let's take a look at the user interface. So, when you want to stake, you should go to kintsugi.interlay.io/staking. Now, I'm showing this on our testnet for various reasons, but the mainnet looks exactly the same. The testnet is a replication of the mainnet just with testnet coins. Now, when you open up the staking interface, what you will see is this window. The first thing you will see is at the top, your balances. In my case, we see that I have 0 staked KINT yet. I also hence have 0 vKINT, and there are 0 KINT rewards projected. I can also not claim any rewards, and what I see next is how much available balance I have. Do note, this will include both vested and unvested tokens. So this will be typically, if you have vested tokens, this number will be larger than your transferable balance. Next, what I can do is I can enter the amount of KINT I would like to stake. And then, let's say I want to stake 1 KINT. The next bit that I do is I have to enter the amount of weeks. Reminder here, the maximum staking duration in total is 96 weeks. And then I can review the parameters of this staking call essentially. What I will see here is the unlock date, the estimated APY, and the estimated KINT rewards. Now do note this is on testnet, so these values here are of course just experimental. You can see that 0 KINT, this is because we've just disabled testnet rewards. On mainnet you will see here a projection of what potentially the KINT staking rewards would be at the end of your staking period. Now keep in mind that the rewards and the APY here is dynamic. It depends on how much vKINT there is in the system. This means that if people add more KINT to stake, the APY will be decreasing because of course, just like with staking as it is usual, it's distributed to the total amount of people who are staking in the system. At the same time, the APY will be increasing slowly because vKINT decreases, right? As time progresses, the amount of vKINT in the system slowly starts to decrease. And unless people relock, the APY will start increasing again. So basically, this projection is an estimate, and we recommend you keeping an eye out on the projected rewards here that you will see based on your stake. Now what we do then is we hit the stake button and sign the transaction. Right, now let me see how I will do this. Right, now that we have signed this transaction, we will wait for it to complete. And then we will see that our staking balance is now being updated. So what does this mean? We can see that we've just staked 1 KINT. We now have a vKINT balance of 0.008 vKINT. Now this is potentially surprising, right? If you're new to the system, you would expect this to be equal to the staked KINT. But remember, vKINT is comprised of the amount of KINT that you stake and the duration. Because 1 week is a very short duration, it's the shortest possible staking duration in the system, of course my vKINT are less. It's 1/96th essentially. Now if I extend the lock, this vKINT balance here will increase. And I also can see here my projected KINT rewards. Now again, this is just an estimate, and as more and more people stake, as the amount of staked KINT in the system becomes stable, the projections will become more accurate. Now what can I do now? What I can do now is I can extend my staking duration. We can see here the date until which I have currently staked my KINT. For me it is the 23rd of March. Now what I can do now is I can do 2 things. I can either extend the lock simply by adding, let's say, another 2 weeks and not adding any KINT in addition. Let me then just quickly sign this transaction so we can proceed with the demo. And basically what I am doing now is I am extending my lock duration. And once it is completed, we will see that our vKINT balance should then increase. There we go. You see the vKINT balance is now increased because in total I am now staking for 3 weeks. Now, something that we'll add to the UI shortly is also better insights of how much longer you can stake. But as you can see now, if I try to enter the maximum staking duration, it will tell me that the maximum staking duration for me is actually only 93 weeks because I have already staked for 3 weeks. So I can only ever go up to a total of 96 weeks in terms of staking duration. Now, while we were doing this, something very interesting happened. The claim rewards button has turned yellow. Well, why is that? This is because the rewards accrue per block. So you literally can just sit there and see how the staking rewards increase on a per block basis, and you can claim them whenever you want. Now, before doing this, let's also take a look what happens if I actually add more stake to the system. So if I'm now willing to increase my stake by 2 extra KINT, I can now see that I cannot enter 96 weeks. I can only enter 93 because in total 93 plus 3 is 96, and this is the maximum staking duration. I can then review the parameters. I can see that the new unlock time is 17th of January 2024. This is quite a bit in the future. My new total stake is 2.9 vKINT, and the estimated APY is also now higher because I have now staked for much longer. My amount of vKINT is higher, and so then I also can see my estimated rewards. Again, these are merely estimates and can change on the fly. So let's sign this transaction and then observe what will happen with our balance. But essentially, this completes this kind of very simple guide. If you follow these steps, you'll be able to stake your KINT, extend your staking duration, deposit more KINT into staking, and now, once this transaction is complete, I will show you how to withdraw your KINT rewards. If you want to claim your KINT rewards, simply hit this button, and that's it. We will see KINT added to our balance, and this completes this guide. Now, what I did not show is how to withdraw your KINT once your lock is completed. For this, once your lock is completed, for me in this case on the 17th of January 2024, this button will turn yellow and you'll be able to click it and withdraw your KINT that you have staked. And that's it. This completes the demo. Now, there is 3 important points to note before staking with Kintsugi. Kintsugi is new technology. The user interface might not yet be ideal, and we'd love to hear your feedback. The system itself is stable, it's audited, but still, we would really like to hear your thoughts on how we can improve this. Parachain block times right now, however, are not stable. This is an issue that is actively being discussed with all parachains and the relay chain parity and so on. The issue that this causes is that the lock times may not be as they seem. This means that if block times change, become slower or faster, your unlock times may change as well. So if you enter 2 weeks and the block time suddenly jumps from 12 seconds to 20 seconds, your lock time will be not 2 weeks, but longer. This is right now a general parachain issue. There is a fix underway, and this is a temporary issue that will hopefully be resolved in the next few weeks. But it's important to keep this in mind, especially if you're only staking for short durations, because this means that these short durations may turn out to be a bit longer. I think the maximum range is 50% upwards. And last but not least, locked means locked. You cannot withdraw your staked KINT until the locking period is over. So before you stake, you should really think, do I want to do this? Do I want to participate in governance? Have I understood the risks? Have I done my research? And this should all be part of your decision-making process. And with that, thanks a lot, and we'll see if there's any questions. All right.
Hopefully you can hear me. We have already quite a few questions in the chat, and we've also collected some kind of commonly asked questions outside the chat, we can also kind of delve into. A couple questions from the community more specific to staking. So we'll start with those, I think, and then maybe circle back around. First one I see here, is there any gas fees to claim and stake the new tokens? And the answer to that is yes. On Kintsugi, you have KINT and Interlay. We use the Inter token for transaction fees, and you will need to pay those to do the actions such as claiming and staking and withdrawal. The next question is, can you already tell us about Interlay staking rewards? Interlay is currently producing blocks and live. What's the next step towards kind of token distribution and staking rewards there? Maybe you could take that one, Alexei?
Absolutely. So, as mentioned before, and again emphasizing, Kintsugi and Interlay have the same code base. This means everything that we're building now on Kintsugi, you will also see on Interlay. Of course, much sooner. So basically, once Interlay goes live, it will go live with the current state of the Kintsugi network, meaning transfers, staking, wallet integrations, explorers, and so on. Now, Interlay is currently producing blocks, and then we've published a public roadmap about the next steps. It's 4 to 6 weeks until essentially transferability is enabled, but I'll stop here because the questions here are more focused on staking. However, highly recommend joining our channels, following the QR code, and then we'll be very happy to answer more detailed questions on the overall Interlay roadmap there.
Cool. I got another question. Maybe you can answer, Alexei. What is the best usage for those tokens that are currently locked? Are there any options?
So, what you can do with locked KINT is you can participate in governance. It's just like any staking mechanism. You lock them, you cannot use them for other purposes. Kintsugi right now, specifically vKINT's main purpose is really to give you the power to vote on governance proposals and become part of the overall governance process, meaning have discussions and really then vote on proposals. In the near future or the midterm, we might explore together, hopefully with you, how we can even utilize the staked tokens for other applications. But for now, locked means locked. This means governance only once they're staked.
I think this also answers probably a few of the other questions we have in the chat regarding collators. So our staking mechanism, at least the one we've described thus far, is not related to collator or validator staking in the traditional sense. This is for governance staking. You can see Polkadot also has a similar staking method where you for each vote in their governance, you can give your vote a conviction, and that basically determines how long your vote or your balance is locked for. So this is kind of a separate thing from collator staking, which we still to review at some point. So I think that answers one of the questions why you can't choose a specific collator, because staking is for yourself in this case, and it's for governance. And then I think the other question on collators is, why does Interlay not have a collator? Where can I find more information regarding the vested mechanism? So I think most of our docs are hosted over docs.interlay.io. Interlay and Kintsugi do have collators, but as mentioned, this staking is not for collators, it's just for governance.
Maybe to add to that.
Yeah.
So, as Gregory mentioned, this staking is not really similar to collator staking. Our collator mechanism right now is not fully decentralized. We're slowly starting to review how we can onboard more collators and decentralize the network. However, this will happen after KBTC launch, which is actually very, very, very soon. What we were looking to do is we're looking to really focus the responsibility of the network security around our vaults, because they are already the heart of the system. There'll be a few proposals made to the community over the next few weeks, and we'll be then glad to explore what the best ways to incentivize collators. Right now, anyone will be, like at the start, most likely anyone will be able to run correlators if they meet specific online requirements. The question, of course, remains, what is the incentive? Interlay staking mechanism, as explained, is not relying on correlators. It's more focused around governance. And we'll make a proposal of how we feel that correlators and potentially vaults can be unified over the next couple of weeks. But I'll stop here and not give away too much just now.
Yeah, awesome, thanks. Some more questions. Once staked for 3 months, can I cancel at any time? No, unfortunately, you have to wait until the lock period expires on your votes. This is because of the implementation. We need to wait until the balance has reached 0. Alexei, are we planning to do more workshops? What's the plan? How many more workshops are we planning to provide over the coming weeks and months?
So our goal is really to do these more frequently. We have a quite sophisticated and big system. Staking was just a first workshop. The next workshops will be about vaults, how to run them, how they work under the hood. And then really we will be doing these workshops for each of the core features and then move over to integrations. We'll also, of course, see what resonance there is, how much interest there is in these workshops, and based on that, we can do more or less.
Cool. Okay, so I think that's it mostly for the staking-related community questions. We'll jump now back over to some of the other commonly asked questions. Let's see.
Actually, Greg, I have one.
Maybe Alexei, you could.
Yeah, I actually, because I've been monitoring the channels, and I have a question that's been asked quite frequently. What is the risk? Like, what is the risk in staking here? Is there slashing, and how does this differ from Polkadot staking? I think this is something that really comes up quite often. I hope the workshop made it clear, but Greg, maybe you can reiterate.
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned, with when I kind of compared validator staking, we don't really have any sort of slashing, any notion of slashing in kind of governance staking. So from that perspective, there's no real risk to locking up, other than obviously you wouldn't be able to then withdraw those tokens up until the end of the lock period. The only kind of main risk, I guess, is that the networks could fail. Obviously, we hope that they don't, but in that case, the tokens would obviously devalue, and it wouldn't give you sufficient time to deleverage your locked position. But no primary risk. Only benefit would be the staking rewards accrued per block. And I think that brings me on to another question I was going to discuss. How often can I claim rewards? And that's, so in our system, Kintsugi, firstly, block rewards are distributed in every block based on the distribution specified in the white paper. So for each block calculated over the distribution period, the rewards will get gradually released. This means that the button that Alexei showed with the little claim button, that will increase every block. So you may kind of claim rewards at any point, but obviously in order to not pay continued amounts of transaction fees, you'd want to delay that and only claim every so often. Those rewards you won't lose any rewards by not claiming. They'll just gradually accrue over time. I think we also saw that, I think maybe you showed this, Alexei, that the APY changed quite dramatically sometimes with different values. Can you maybe clarify again a bit why that APY kept changing?
Absolutely. So the APY and basically what under the hood, the estimated rewards for your locking period, they depend not just on how much KINT and for how long you staked, but also how your stake compares to the wider system. And the stake in the system is always changing. It's very dynamic. On one hand, more people deposit stake, more people start to participate, but they can also stake for a week or 48 weeks or 96 weeks. So basically the stake may increase or decrease based on what parameters people selected. In addition, of course, as mentioned before, the stake overall decreases slowly because time progresses, we get closer to the unlock period of everybody, so the vKINT amount decreases. So if you keep increasing the stake, you basically keep your vKINT high, and that's why basically you can max out your voting power and hence your claim on the rewards. What's important to note is a few people noticed during the very, very early stages of bootstrapping this staking is that the APY would increase and decrease for larger values. And the reason is, of course, that if you deposit a large amount of stake into the system and you're suddenly the biggest whale in terms of staking, you might be actually pushing down the APY because, as mentioned before, the stake is distributed to everyone proportional to the total stake. So under the hood, this means one vKINT gets you less KINT rewards if there's more stake in the system. It's a pretty standard mechanism. Normally, you don't see this in other staking systems because you will join typically not at the very launch, but a bit later. And the same will be with Kintsugi and Interlay. As time progresses over the next few days, the total amount of KINT that people want to lock in will be locked in, and then these numbers will stabilize.
And just to circle back on the lock period, we have time measured in weeks there. But I think you mentioned this before, 1 week isn't exactly 1 week at the moment, is it?
That is correct. So as mentioned at the end of the presentation, block times on parachains are currently fluctuating. The ideal target are 12 seconds. Sometimes blocks are 18, sometimes even more, sometimes shorter. On average, I think it goes between 12 and 18 seconds right now. There is a fix incoming that will push the block times back to 12 seconds, and that will basically then make sure that 1 week staking is 1 week. Until that happens, it will fluctuate a bit. So do keep an eye out on this. Specifically for shorter periods, just be ready that if you stake for 1 week, it might be 1 week and 2 days, for example, or 1 week and 3 days in the worst case, if suddenly there's a major issue with parachain block times. It's not something we can do much about. It's an issue with the overall Kusama parachains, but it's being worked on, and hopefully this will be resolved. I see a question here from Rostislav, or basically a comment is, I guess you should let people lock their KINT on different times. For example, I want to do 2 or more locking, first for 4 weeks, second for max period, third only 1 week. So the thing is, you can absolutely do that. You just have to use different accounts, right? You can just create a new Polkadot GS account and then move the KINT that you want to stake for shorter periods and stake from there. What we think you could be doing is you could have an account for longer staking and then another account for shorter staking where you only use it for like locking up 1 week. The reason is, once you've locked up for 96 weeks, that account is locked, like you cannot shorten the stake. The lock is per account. This is for performance reasons. So essentially you can absolutely do that. You can have, but you just have to have multiple accounts in staking to have longer and shorter periods. And then another question is how much rewards are allocated for governance stake versus vaults versus collateral staking. I'll quickly jump into this one. So you can find all this information on our docs page, docs.interlay.io, specifically under the tokenomics. The vaults rewards are the largest portion of the system. Vaults are allocated 30% of the total supply. Why? Because they are the heart of the system. They put up collateral, they have capital costs because they insure users against loss of BTC, and hence vaults are incentivized highly, especially initially during this bootstrapping phase, because we need to get people to run vaults so users can deposit BTC and mint KBTC and use that in DeFi. And our goal is here really to bootstrap liquidity in Kusama. This is why the portion of rewards is the highest to vaults. For staking, it's 5% of the total supply. And for collaterators, this is still not yet released. There will be rewards for collaterators. However, they will be, of all of those 3 parts, they will be the lowest because essentially the responsibilities of collaterators, it's important, but the load and the cost to run a collator is comparably low to vaults or just the normal governance staking where you put up a high capital cost. What we're looking to do, and again, this is just a teaser, is to combine this. We're looking to really, ideally, if you're running a collator, you're also running a vault and you're part of the governance, because this aligns you fully with the success and the health of the network, and of course justifies receiving the highest portion of rewards. And this is something that we're working towards, and of course before this is launched, Kintsugi is the decentralized network, and of course before anything is launched, the community will have to decide and vote upon it. So we'll be looking to receive your feedback on this specific point in the near future.
It's also worth noting that currently collators do earn fees, like transaction fees, from any transactions bundled within a block that they're authorized to produce. So they are still currently incentivized. But as Alexei says, we're looking into additional ways to incentivize collators in the future. I think that concludes most of the community questions. I did see a couple of questions related to liquidity and bootstrapping pools, kind of out of scope for, I think, for this workshop. So please do post those again in Discord, and someone will answer there and provide context. But if, Alexei, unless you have anything else to mention, I think that might be it for today's workshop.
Yeah, I think one last point kind of to highlight is the question, of course, that often comes up with systems like this. Is this really decentralized? And I think it's really important to highlight that staking is fully decentralized. It's directly with the parachain. Nobody can ever access your staked assets. It's locked in the parachain. As mentioned, there are no validators. You cannot really get slashed. The risk is that if you don't actively participate in governance, or you basically push governance of the network in a decision where it breaks or basically it devalues, then of course your risk is that your staked assets will devalue. That's essentially the risk that we all bear. And as for the governance mechanism, we're actually quite proud that we managed to launch in a fully decentralized manner. I know it's common practice to start centralized and then move over to decentralization, but because our core product is Bitcoin, it has to be decentralized from day one. And this is why if you look at the token distribution, if you look at the governance mechanics, you will see that we as a team, we are just minority shareholders. We can only propose and vote on specific things, just like the rest of the community. And it's really up to the community to make decisions. We are only now guiding, advising, proposing, but decisions are made by people who are in the current community. And in fact, what we've done, we've went a step further, is we've rate limited the teams and the investors' voting power. So our voting power is actually limited, and really to make sure that at no point in time, no matter how many liquid tokens there are, we can never have majority of the voting power. And this is actually something I don't think many other projects do, but for us it was very important to ensure full decentralization, and that it's really in the hands of the community what happens with the Kintsugi and Interlay networks. And I think with that, we can conclude today's session. Thanks a lot for joining, and look forward to meeting you at future workshops.
Yep. Thanks everyone, and thanks Alexei for doing the short presentation and demo. And yeah, thanks everyone for all your questions.
Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.